Imagine opening a world map in the year 2050 and finding holes where countries used to be. No flag, no capital, no people. It sounds like science fiction, but for several real nations on Earth right now, this is the trajectory scientists, demographers, and economists are openly forecasting. Some are drowning beneath rising oceans, their highest points already lower than a basketball hoop. Others are emptying out from the inside, losing more citizens every year than they gain. A few are crumbling under conflict, drought, and collapsing economies that may never recover. In the next 10 minutes, we'll travel to 7 places where the very concept of statehood is under threat. We'll meet the leaders fighting to save their homelands, the families already packing to leave, and the international laws scrambling to catch up. These aren't abstract climate warnings or distant headlines. These are countries with passports, prime ministers, and Olympic teams, and by 2050, some of them may exist only in archives. This is how a nation disappears. Tuvalu is a chain of 9 coral atolls in the South Pacific, home to roughly 11,000 people. Its highest natural point is just under 5 meters above sea level, and most of the country sits closer to 2. According to NASA satellite data, sea levels around Tuvalu have risen about 15 centimeters since 1993, 1.5 times the global average. King tides now routinely flood the runway of the main airport, and salt water is poisoning the freshwater lenses beneath the soil, killing crops. In 2022, Tuvalu's foreign minister delivered a climate speech standing knee-deep in the ocean to show the world what was coming. The next year, Australia signed a landmark treaty offering Tuvaluans residency and an explicit promise to recognize Tuvalu's statehood, even if its land disappears. The government is also building a digital twin nation, uploading its culture, laws, and territory to the metaverse. By 2050, Tuvalu may exist as a flag, a server, and a diaspora, but no longer as habitable ground. The Maldives is famous for overwater bungalows and turquoise lagoons, but its postcard beauty hides an existential crisis. Made up of nearly 1,200 islands, 80% of the country sits less than 1 meter above sea level, making it the lowest-lying nation on Earth. The World Bank warns that under current emissions trajectories, much of the Maldives could become uninhabitable by 2050. Back in 2009, the president held a cabinet meeting underwater in scuba gear to dramatize the threat. Since then, the government has tried everything, building a fortress-like artificial island called Huhumale, raised 2 meters higher than the capital, and even quietly exploring buying land in India, Sri Lanka, or Australia to relocate citizens. Tourism, which makes up nearly a third of GDP, depends on the very reefs being bleached by warming water. The Maldives is racing the clock with seawalls, sand pumps, and floating cities, but engineers admit you cannot armor 1,200 islands forever. The ocean is patient. Kiribati spreads across 33 islands, scattered over an ocean area larger than India. Its 120,000 citizens live mostly on slivers of coral barely 2 meters above the Pacific. In 2014, the Kiribati government did something unprecedented. It bought 20 square kilometers of land in Fiji, more than 2,000 kilometers away, as an insurance policy. President Anote Tong called it migration with dignity. The idea that if Kiribati must evacuate, its people should arrive somewhere as landowners, not refugees. Coastal erosion is accelerating. Entire villages have already been moved inland, and freshwater wells turn brackish during every storm surge. The United Nations has warned that Kiribati could become uninhabitable well before its land fully submerges, simply because there'll be no drinkable water and no arable soil. Children growing up there today are taught practical skills for resettlement abroad, alongside their native language and culture. Kiribati is preparing calmly and methodically for the possibility that its homeland will outlive it only as memory. The Marshall Islands carry a double burden. Like their Pacific neighbors, they are drowning. Average elevation barely 2 meters, with major flooding events striking the capital Majuro repeatedly in recent years. But they also carry a radioactive scar. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 67 nuclear weapons here, including the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb, 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. Today, much of that fallout sits inside the Runit Dome, a concrete cap on Inuitak Atoll that scientists warn is cracking and leaking as seas rise around it. Climate change and Cold War history are colliding in real time. Under a compact of free association with the United States, Marshallese citizens can live and work in America, and tens of thousands already have, settling in places like Springdale, Arkansas. The population back home is shrinking each year. By 2050, the Marshall Islands may persist as a legal entity headquartered abroad, while its physical homeland slowly returns to ocean and to silence. Not every disappearing nation is sinking. Some are simply running out of people. Bulgaria has the fastest shrinking population on Earth. In 1989, when communism fell, nearly 9 million people lived there. Today it's under 6.5 million, and United Nations projections show it could fall below 5 million by 2050, a loss of nearly half the country in a single lifetime. Three forces are draining it. Birth rates are among Europe's lowest, well under replacement level. Young, educated Bulgarians emigrate en masse to Germany, the UK, and Spain seeking higher wages, and the elderly population left behind dies faster than babies are born. Entire villages in the countryside are now abandoned, schools shuttered, churches silent. Demographers describe it as a slow-motion implosion that no policy has reversed. Bulgaria won't vanish from the map politically, its borders will remain. But the Bulgaria of culture, language, and lived community could become a hollowed shell, a country technically existing while emptying itself out, year after quiet year. Ukraine's case is the most painful and the most uncertain. Before Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Ukraine had about 41 million people. Today, credible estimates put the population closer to 31 million inside government-controlled territory, a loss of roughly 10 million in just a few years. Millions fled abroad as refugees. Hundreds of thousands have been killed or wounded. Birth rates have collapsed to historic lows, with women reasonably postponing children during wartime. Cities like Mariupol have been physically erased. Entire regions remain occupied or contested. The United Nations projects Ukraine could fall below 25 million by 2050, even in optimistic scenarios. The country's borders, sovereignty, and very existence are being defended at enormous cost. Ukraine will almost certainly remain on the map. Its people are fighting precisely so it does. But the demographic, economic, and territorial wounds are so deep that the Ukraine of 2050 may be unrecognizable. Smaller, older, scattered across Europe, rebuilding from scars that will take generations to fully heal. Yemen is being undone by an invisible enemy, thirst. Its capital, Sana'a, sits at over 2,000 meters elevation in a parched basin, and hydrologists have warned for years that it could become the first capital city in the world to run completely out of water. Aquifers are being pumped down at 3 to 4 times their natural recharge rate, much of it to irrigate cat, a mildly narcotic chewed leaf. Layered on top is a brutal civil war that has raged since 2014, killing hundreds of thousands directly and through famine, cholera, and collapsed infrastructure. The United Nations has repeatedly called Yemen the world's worst humanitarian crisis. More than half the population needs aid to survive. Climate models project rising temperatures and more erratic rainfall across the Arabian Peninsula. If the water runs out and the war continues, Yemen as a functioning state could fragment entirely by 2050, splintering into rival territories. The country may persist on paper while ceasing to exist as a unified nation in any meaningful sense. When a country disappears, we don't just lose coordinates on a map. We lose languages spoken nowhere else, recipes passed down for centuries, songs, jokes, gods, ways of reading the stars and the tides. We lose entire human experiments in how to live. The 7 nations we explored today face very different threats: rising oceans, falling birth rates, war, drought. But they share one thing: their fate is being decided right now by choices made in places far from their borders. Carbon emissions in one hemisphere drown islands in another. Wars launched by powerful states empty smaller ones. The good news is that none of this is fully written yet. Treaties, migration pathways, climate action, and digital preservation are buying time and dignity. The story of the 21st century may be how humanity decided whether to let nations vanish quietly or whether we chose, finally, to act. If you found this journey worth taking, subscribe to TheSuperfy for more weekly deep dives. See you next time.